Residents at the Bridgeport Condominiums in Long Beach, California, have been worried about health concerns from unsightly debris appearing on the concrete walls or CMUs for quite some time. As a result, they have elected to test the oXoCrete system on a couple of the walls. This example of algae and mold appeared on the most extreme blocks in the garage. However, other issues were discovered in the condominium. So how much would this bother you if you lived in this building? Would it bother you to have the concrete debris dripping onto your car? Expensive alternatives have been tried to rectify these problems, such as installing French drain or cleaning and applying a coat of paint. The costs expended to date were estimated well north of $100,000. An engineer called for a three-step system that residents adopted as a safe and environmentally friendly treatment. They chose to go with oXoCrete. Here's what we found. Concrete tests were conducted before and after the application. Test results showed marked improvements in the overall health of the concrete in areas such as permeability, passivity, carbonation, and alkalinity. What this means is that the blocks are not as porous. The concrete has become rehydrated. It is stronger and it is expected to last far longer than they would have if not treated by oXoCrete. This rain season, 2022 through 2023, was one of the most severe in California memory. As a result, severe water saturation of the earth from behind the CMU walls leaked through the walls. This section was treated with oXoCrete. So which blocks would you like to live with? We thought so. Recently, we sat down with Don Newton, president of the Bridgeport Home Owners Association. Here's what he had to say about oXoCrete and working with the approved oXoCrete applicators.
I think the first thing we noticed was water leakage. The most visible symptom was all the phosphorescence coming out. In fact, we had phosphorescence dripping from the ceiling onto cars. And we were considering putting in French drains literally all the way around our entire building. It apparently was not drained properly from the beginning. And when Design Build came up with oXoCrete as a possible solution, I was more than willing to give it a shot. And I've been very pleasantly surprised and happy with the results. It's a recurring problem. It's worse, of course, in the winter, and that's when we really notice, especially the south-facing garage walls. There's water that just drips down constantly. Any rain whatsoever, the garage becomes a little bit of a pool, and the water just drips down all the way along the perimeter walls. And it's not just algae, but it's just water, and almost looks like moldy, really nasty water. Eventually it'll dry out, and so everybody forgets about it until it stops raining again. Well, it stops right now. It'll probably start again in November, and that's when people start thinking about it again, and that's when I get all the complaints. And so that's why I'm hoping that the entire application of oXoCrete is going to get rid of the lion's share of that algae and slime that we have all over it. And it's white, flaky material. Almost looks like calcified concrete. And it's so bad that we had to have people put covers on their cars when they park. It's not right to have covered parking and have to cover your car anyway. And that's the problem we've had. And when specialty coatings came in and cleaned that, we did it in just one small area, if you recall, and that really helped with the dropping. We haven't had that calcification problem since, and that was only one treatment. We didn't even go through the entire oXoCrete process on that one area. They just cleaned it and sprayed it once on the overhead. Now, we didn't do any testing on that, as you recall, but you know, it's a lot better, and I get feedback directly from homeowners. Most of the residents are kind of oblivious to what we're actually doing. Board members, we were met with a healthy dose of skepticism from the very beginning. because it's just something that is a little difficult to understand. You know, we're infusing CMU walls with this solution, which is going to harden and push phosphorescence out. Most people, their eyes just kind of glaze over. But when they saw the results, and they go down there during the rain, and they see that this wall that hasn't been treating is dripping and weeping, and this wall is not, pretty hard to deny the effectiveness of the treatment. Initially, we got some estimates to paint the whole unit. And one of the painters came down and said, look at all this phosphorescence you've got all over your walls. We have a solution to that. We're going to clean your walls and we're going to paint them with some, I don't even know what they were going to paint them with. And I sort of scratched my head and said, well, the water's still going to come through and come right to that paint level. And eventually that paint's going to chip and the water's going to come right through. It's not a solution, it was a Band-Aid. What we wanted was to stop the water coming through. And therefore, that effervescence or phosphorescence, whatever it's called, calcification, people will see that that's no longer a problem. And that's what we've seen. So from just a macro look at this, I would say the visual effect is probably the most important thing that all the homeowners. I'm just happy that those concrete walls no longer have water just seeping through them and losing their strength. And that's probably the biggest thing for me. Probably the biggest benefit that we've seen, two benefits I'll go with. A, oXoCrete has proven that it is effective because we don't have water coming through those walls anymore. And B, the price. We put in an additional French drain, and I would say it's maybe a 30-foot French drain at well north of $100,000. The oXoCrete is less than a third of that, or about a third of that, and it's going to treat essentially the entire garage that's exposed to earth. So it's effective and it's cost effective too. So that's probably the biggest benefit that I've seen so far. And really what brought us to this is everything around, most of our problems structurally have to do with water intrusion. You know, we've got water intrusion from planters, we've got water intrusion primarily from plantings and the dirt coming around. And that's what we're trying to solve. And then when the Florida, incident happened, everybody started that's when people started paying more attention to oXoCrete with my, teachings of it, or at least my preachings of it. So that's the biggest benefits that I've seen so far. And let's just talk about the time. I mean, oXoCrete's going to do the whole thing in about a month, or not oXoCrete, but especially coatings. About a month is how long it's going to take, and that's only on 4 separate days. So it's not even taking a month full time. It's 4 days total. The Big Dig took a year, and every time it rained or anything, they had to stop work. We had to stop work for permits, we had to stop work for parts, we had to stop work for everything you could think of. This is about as painless as it gets, except for moving the stuff out of the storage lockers. That's about the only difficult part we have. If there isn't any storage lockers, it doesn't affect us at all. We have to move our cars for a day, big deal. Considering just buying a pressure washer to get all this algae off. But if we can stop the growth of the algae, that would be a huge thing. And if you look out there, all this concrete, all this formed concrete is discolored and looks bad. So this is definitely the next place we're going to start looking at it, is the pool area. First of all, I'd say do your due diligence. Maybe get an engineer out here to actually assess the concrete. If there's structural issues, obviously oXoCrete is not going to solve huge cracks, in the podium deck. And we did. We had an engineer come out. Our podium deck was looking pretty good. The CMU walls were a whole different ball of wax, and all they could give us was more French drains. I think this is a cost-effective and a time-effective way to treat it. It's minimally disruptive to the entire community. I mean, it's less disruptive than power washing the garage. We had to move all the cars out. This is a very small inconvenience. So I would say yes, I am really happy with oXoCrete, and I wouldn't have signed on to do this if I wasn't. And I have done my due diligence, and I have looked, and I've read all the engineer reports, and I've read the chemist reports. It's all incredibly optimistic in my mind.